Well, hello, everybody. I'm Teresa Young. I'm your alumni director at Wayland, and we've got some great content for you tonight. I am thrilled to be joined by two of our distinguished military veteran alumni, and they're going to have some great words for you, some great advice, their own experiences in transitioning from military life to civilian workforce, and the many challenges and rewards maybe that come from that. So I'm excited to introduce them to you and then let them share a little bit with you tonight. So first of all, we've got Mark Adams. Mark is a 2013 graduate of the Phoenix, Arizona campus with an Associate of Applied Science in General Business Studies and a Bachelor of Occupational Science in Management. Mark served honorably for 14 years of active duty in the U.S. Air Force. And in 2015, Mark transitioned to the Air Force Reserves as an E6 so he could pursue a role leading quality for the solar division of Flex Limited, a technology leader and contract manufacturer. Mark is now the Director of Customer Experience, where he leads improvements within the customer journey for the company's Agility Business Solutions Group, a $17 billion a year organization. Mark is scheduled to retire from the Air Force Reserves in February of 2021 following 20 years of service. So welcome, Mark, and thank you for your service. We appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing from you tonight.
Thanks, Teresa.
Joined by Jack De Forrest. Jack is a 2007 graduate of the San Antonio campus with a bachelor's degree in management, and he earned his associate degree from the Community College of the Air Force. Jack also has a Master of Public Administration degree from Norwich University that he earned in 2013. Jack served the Air Force nearly 32 years, retiring in 2008. He spent more than 12 years with the Transportation Department of the Northeast ISD in San Antonio, starting as a bus driver and advancing to routing supervisor and then to assistant director before taking the helm as executive director of the department in 2017. In his role, Jack oversees 450 employees running 300 different bus routes a year to move 6,000 plus students to school in their various activities. Jack's wife, Kim, is a retired teacher, and she's also a Wayland alumnus, so we're proud to have her. So thank you, Jack, again for your many years of service and for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing from you, gentlemen. So let's start with this. You guys had such great information. I know it's going to be more than we can probably tackle in just this time period, but I know there's some great gems here. So I'm hopefully hitting the high points here. But I love that Mark says this: transition is more than just about employment. It's something to leave military service. Some people just retire and they're able to just retire into retirement, and that's great. But most people I find are itching to do something else, or if they're young enough, like Jack was, even after 30 years of service, you're young enough to have some life left in you. You want to do something else and give back a little to the community. So, but you're right, it's more than just employment. So talk a little bit about both. I'll give both of you a chance to share, but a little bit about what that means and how employment is a little bit different focus when you're moving from military role into the civilian life.
Right. So when I talked about that, I was mentioning that, a job is one thing, a career is one thing, and there's definitely aspects in that. But there's also your life, where you're going to live. There's so many people who are transitioning from Europe or Asia, and they may not know what kind of career they want to do or where they're even going to live, and that can be challenging. Then there's also the vernacular. Funny story, I was working with my colleagues and I had my employees and we just had an audit, and I wanted to go talk with them after the audit. And so I said, hey guys, let's go do a hot wash. And my coworkers were just laughing. And they was like, what does that mean? You guys gonna go wash each other? And I was like, no, we're gonna do like a debrief or something. And it's like, then why don't you say debrief? So, you have this vernacular where people just don't understand what you're saying sometimes, that you have to transition as well.
That's true. That's true. We always laugh about how academia, we love our acronyms here. We got lots of them too. So it's got its own language as well. Jack, what about you? Did you find that to be the case as well?
Yeah, with enlisted military members, we often start out pretty early after high school, if not right after. And the military does a great job of making sure that we're trained and we have an assignment to go to and a job, and when that one ends, another assignment. And So you can spend a long time and your path is not made or laid out for you, but there is an expectation that you'll move to what they ask you to go do and master that. And so as you approach retirement or separation, it's a different mindset, because in the civilian sector, I don't think there are many folks that are trying to move you from one role to another. You have a lot of responsibility for your own development. And if you don't think about that, even a couple of years before you decide to separate, you see military members that are retired or separated, and they're just trying to find something to do because they didn't get their head around it long enough before they left to make some plans, to think about it, to get a degree that would set them up for some opportunities or a certification. It's a very different world, but it's exciting. And it's, there's life after active duty. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love you put here, Mark, that nearly a third of veteran job seekers are underemployed, that's a current thing. They work a job that requires much less experience and skills than they can bring or they're qualified for. How do you overcome something like that? And do you feel like that happened to both of you, that you end up someplace because it just doesn't translate?
Right. So I think first is understanding what underemployed means, right? It's not saying that you don't have a job. It's saying that the role that you applied for, that you're accepted, may require experience less than what you have. It may be at a pay less than what you have. And so, yeah, you have so many people who are underemployed, and a lot of that does come back to that translation piece. When I don't know how to translate my background, and I don't know how to understand your job description because we don't speak the same language in terms of job roles, I may end up taking a role that's less. At the same time, if I don't know how to communicate and translate my experiences to you and be able to justify why I fit the role that you're looking for, that also becomes hard. But at the same time, you can't then be overconfident. You can't say, well, I was a chief and therefore I need to be the CEO, or, I was a colonel and I need to be, the CFO. It doesn't necessarily work that way. You have to be able to have that fit within the company based off your experiences.
Jack, what do you think? Do you see
Yeah,
that?
Finding that first opportunity is maybe the biggest challenge. I kind of think if a military member knows what field they want to work in or what skill they want to bring to a certain number of fields, that they have a better leg up than throwing 100 resumes out there thinking, well, I'm a sort of a director type in the military. They should hire me to be a director type somewhere. I think that's just throwing, grains of sand at the wind. And if they can focus their effort on a particular industry or a job within a series of industries, they have a better chance. And of course, to do that, you might need to seek that degree or certification again a couple of years before you're ever done with active duty. If you start getting ready and looking 6 months out, you may be a couple of years too late. It is hard to get an opportunity in the civilian sector. Mark will tell you, and I'm sure he knows, we know a few guys and girls that go straight to a big time opportunity, but that's because of their network and somebody knew them on active duty and wanted to pull them into that new, very senior level role. But that's a needle in a haystack. Most of us have to find the first step on the ladder and then get climbing.
Right.
I find when I comb through our LinkedIn, files of different alums and what folks are doing, I see a whole lot of people who've moved from active duty into a lot of government contracting. So in some cases, I've even heard them say to me, I do the same thing I did in the military. I just do it now for this company. And I think it's a comfort level probably. Also, they don't have to worry about, the change of the language. And so that's a good thing that those opportunities are out there, but not everybody, I think, wants that. I think some people really want something different. So the biggest thing, and you said this about the language barrier, is how you translate that into things. Is this anything that, and I don't mean to dog on them if they don't, but is this anything that the military tries to help you with, or are you sort of on your own to really take the initiative to prepare yourself, as Jack said, sometimes 2 to 3 years before you plan to separate?
Yeah, so to throw some numbers out there, 72% of hiring managers don't necessarily understand what you're saying, and 79% of applicants don't know how to say it. So when you're talking about how to find those opportunities, it makes sense that people will just roll over into what they already know with that government contract job. And a lot of the veterans that I work with, they'll be like, well, can you help me to navigate USA jobs? And that's not, I don't do that because I don't know USA jobs. It's a complicated beast in its own. Honestly, it's what do you really want to do, not what can you fall into. And being able to have those goals and be able to have that drive, definitely be able to help with that. So yes, I agree that it can be a challenge and it can also be easy, but it's worth it if you want to do something and then be able to go after it. It's just get the coaching, get the help, get the network so you can be able to understand what that process looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see how it would be highly frustrating, like you said, to know how do you translate that. In my role here, we also sort of wear a second hat as career services. So we're trying to provide some of those things for not only our alums, but our students, and that's across the board. So some of them may be a 45-year-old man who's a couple years away from retirement from the military, and I've trying to help him too, and I certainly don't speak that language, but I can see how it would be highly frustrating for them to not know how to do that unless there's somebody to help them. So are there resources out there for something like that, or that I can even brush up on to be able to help folks like that? Because it's such a specialized thing, but what a need.
Right. Sort of, when you think about it, there are free resources out there. There are VSOs out there. There are a lot of people who want to help. It's just, I think you've got to tap into all of it and really be able to explore what makes sense to you, because it's also got to be logical for you. And it's got to make sense to you, and you got to be able to restate it and understand that process.
Okay.
Yeah, and Teresa, years and years ago, the government required the military to set up transition assistance programs, which have become even more robust in the last 5 years, Mark? They were there when I left 12 years ago, and they require service members to attend a week's worth of lecture and preparation and testing and skill building activities, and offer much more than just a week's worth of it. But it's pretty intense. It's intense to the point that when I left, they wanted you to attend the first round 3 years out, and then the final round a year out. And that was, that really gets you ready. And it's funny because when you sign up for that first one, the next day everybody says, hey, he's retiring. And of course I'm like, no, in 3 years I might be retiring. I'm supposed to do this 3 years early. So the military, the Department of Defense, does a good job of offering quite a bit. And a lot of people, everybody takes advantage of the minimum amount of it. But if you're not focused on your next career, your next life, you're just filling a square, and that won't get you what you need to be ready to transition. I mean, nobody's going to bring it to you or hand it to you in the civilian sector as a rule.
Right. And to add to that, I do highly recommend that people take that transition assistance early. It used to be the rule was before every reenlistment, you could go take transition assistance. And that was a smart thing to do because you're able to build on this. But now with that kind of forever reenlistment thing that exists now, it may slip people's minds. So I highly recommend don't wait till the end, because you're going to learn a ton. But also keep in mind, the training is very generic. I think if you can have some sort of idea of what it is that you want to do, then you can take all of that and be able to really focus it into what you want to do. I see so many people when you're talking about people on LinkedIn who say they're everything. Well, I'm a project manager and I'm a program manager. I'm an operations person. I'm this and I'm this. You know, you really want to have some sort of focus so you can be able to drive it.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I think both of you, I know this was Jack's case, and I think it was yours too, based on the years I'm looking at, got your degrees with Wayland while you were still serving. So was that part of your transition plan of something's coming down the pike, I know I'm going to need something different, or, you know, how did that play into you making that transition? Not that that was the gateway to every single thing, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, you know, you talked about your experience with underemployment, and I tell you that's where it was. So I knew I wanted to get my education, I already was, but I did that transition assistance early, like I said, before reenlistment, and I started doing interviews as part of my kind of training. And the jobs I was being offered, I just didn't feel were the right fit for me. So I was really dedicated at that point. I said, you know what? Nope, I have to finish this degree. It is the cornerstone of my application and where I see myself going. And so, yeah, I did it while on active duty. And then afterwards, you know, I earned my master's the same. And because education's important.
Yeah, definitely. Jack, how did that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my whole career, I had taken classes to take classes and had a million hours at half a dozen different schools from one end of the country to the other. And about 5 years out, I kind of was getting a little panicky because I didn't have a bachelor's degree. And I thought that that would be a pretty high value in, you know, increasingly responsible civilian roles. And I had come from a family where parents both had their college and sisters did. And I felt a little bit behind the world, but knew that I had been, quote, taking classes. So, you know, Wayland was at Randolph and I was at Randolph, and somebody said, you ought to check them out if you need to, you know, finish a degree finally. And I got going, and it just was a great fit at the San Antonio campus, and even did some online courses when I thought I was too old to do online courses and loved it, actually. And so a couple of years into my civilian employment, when I thought maybe I could do more with my employer, I looked around and I wondered, what do people that have higher roles have that I don't? They have a master's degree. And because Wayland had taught me not to be afraid of distance learning, you know, I was able to complete that distance learning program out of Norwich University, and just had to attend the 1 week residency after a couple of years up in Vermont at the end. And, you know, both those degrees gave me opportunities that were requirements for a position. Certainly didn't teach you skills that they wanted you to have, but they wanted folks in those leadership roles in the organization I'm in to have those levels of education.
Yeah. And you know, we tell our traditional students that by no means is a degree the be all end all, but it does open you some doors, and sometimes it is just a check, that a box you can check that you've got that, and also shows that you've persevered and you've kept steady and to the completion of a degree. Even if you end up going to a career that's really different than that, it lays enough of a foundation. So I feel like you probably have that too. You know, 30 years, 14 years in the military, Lord knows y'all have learned a lot, and could probably put 4 or 5 degrees together with what you've learned and the experiences you have, but that's not exactly how that translates, is it? So sometimes having that paper helps. So we'll make sure that we're sharing some really, you know, helpful tips for folks of, you know, if you're finding yourself in this, and of course, you guys mentioned that transition service. I hope people will take advantage of that. It sounds like a great way from the military point of view to try to help you a little bit. But I know y'all have some great tips on how maybe you weathered this transition yourself. So the tailored resume, That's another thing I find with my young students who don't have any experience at all. You know, maybe they've sonic car hopped or they've been a student worker on a campus job. You know, I say don't focus on every little task you did, but translate it into the skills you learned. You know, I'm proficient in Microsoft Office, you know, because I've done these things as a student. And so I'm sure some of that plays into what you guys have had to do, but talk a little bit about how you tailor your resume to try to make that transition.
Yeah, the key is look at the job description. So if you're somebody with no experience and you're looking at the internship roles, they're not necessarily expecting you to have that experience. But look at the job description. You know, if you're transitioning like I was, and they're saying, hey, you know, we need somebody who can. So I'm in the process improvement realm. No, we need somebody who's actually facilitated or done process improvement. Well, my resume is going to not only show the teams I've done or the number of initiatives I've done, but what the results of those were. It's going to show the breadth. So if they want somebody who's experienced in quality improvements, not necessarily maybe dollar or something like that, I'm going to focus on the quality improvements. A lot of times people think the resume is an opportunity for me to regurgitate my performance reports when it's not. It's to look at the job description and then be able to tie it and use their words too. In the Air Force, we called it process improvement. A lot of companies I applied for called it quality improvement or continuous improvement. And that's what I called myself. I was the quality improvement manager, or, you know, what have you. So that way it was translatable.
That makes sense. Jack, how did that work for you?
Yeah, good words, Mark. You know, one thing they taught us coming out of the Air Force was not to try to provide a 6-page resume because it might not get a good hard look, and so you had everybody trying to develop the 1-page resume. Well, that's maybe a little bit too lean, and so like Mark says, you know, you've got to have the right language on there. Because if you use too much of your military language or experience and just use those words that you know, having been in the military, it can make it a little fuzzy. And another thing that Mark, I think we've touched on the side is you know, you don't want yourself to look as much like a senior airman in your resume as you did in the Air Force, right? Because some people will hold that against you. That you might have been a junior enlisted person, or they said even an enlisted person. And this is not about where you were, it's about what you can bring to where you hope to go. And so you might not want to identify, you know, specifically some of the titles that use the language of the military per se. I think one thing that enlisted military people, I'll use the word suffer from a little bit, is we don't have an alma mater by the time we're 22. And all an alma mater really is a network, right? It's 4 years of having been in school with some people and endured some hardship and succeeded. And so you have a network at age 22 that can benefit you for the rest of your life. Well, if you've been 4 years at a base in the frozen north, your network looks a little different. Especially if you decide to leave after 4 years, lots of those guys and girls are staying on. So you're really having to find a new network. And your resume can be helpful or can be hurtful to that end.
Right. And if I could add 2 points to what Jack just mentioned, that bias that exists out there about your what rank you held absolutely exists. I mean, and it's unfortunate, but it absolutely exists. I see applications where they say, well, what rank were you? And it's like, gosh, why can't this be one of those questions that's not allowed? You know, it's horrible. I've had phone calls where, you know, there was like, well, what rank were you? And I would tell them, and it's like, well, this is really a role that's more so for a lieutenant colonel. And it's like, but you're dismissing everything I've done, you know, and so forth. So that bias exists. And the second thing, when you're talking about networking, I would just add, network within the career field that you're trying to get into. That's important, you know. So if you look at my LinkedIn connections, I've got about 185 that have a military affiliation out of the 1.1 thousand some odd connections I have. 709 of them, so vast majority, are all in the process improvement realm, which is my career field. So it's really important that you network the career field you want to be in and not just the company you're in.
And that probably, I can imagine, just like planning for a separation, benefits you to do early. to begin thinking, I might want to move into this field and begin to get to know some of these folks. And, you know, my dream, of course, is that that's kind of what our alumni association can serve as for you guys, is let me help connect you with somebody, you know, that's in a field that I know is working in, that you might want to be in. And, you know, let's introduce you to somebody. If you're just dying to work at Raytheon, let's see, I've got some alums out there. Let's connect you guys and see, you know, if they can get you some connections. It is not always what you know, it's sometimes who you know, and that doesn't always work, but it never hurts to reach out, right, and have their take on that. So I think that's important to build that network and really reach out to people. I don't think enough people understand that. And I certainly don't think our young people understand it. I think you guys probably understand it more than anything because you do a lot of it, you know, in that role. You do meet a lot of people and you get a lot of people come in front of you over those years you serve, I'm sure. So I love this part about don't trust the automated tools, but use them. So expound on that a little bit when it comes to, I guess, applying or doing a resume.
Yeah, so I was talking about there's so many features out there. You know, like if you type in your AFSC or your career field into Google, it will give you a list of what jobs you're eligible for. But, you know, I've talked to so many veterans and, you know, so they may be jet engine mechanic like I was. You know, I worked at the F-16 my entire career. But when I talk to them, you know, they're like, I really enjoyed the people aspect of it. Well, you're talking HR. You know, maybe they were a first sergeant, you know, you're talking HR, they were training, you're talking HR. So at that point, it's not so much what career field you had. And so a lot of those free automated tools do that, you know, they're like, oh, okay, you were a jet engine mechanic. And there's even veteran ones, it's called the VMET. And it will list down all the military education that you've had, all the training that you've had, and then what your career field description is. And it puts all in civilian language, if you will, so you can be able to use that for your resume. But that's just too generic, and it's also assuming that the career field you have is the career field you're going to stay in.
That's true. That's true. You don't necessarily want to stay in the same field, especially if it's something you want to do something totally different. So that makes sense. That makes sense. I also thought it was interesting that you said to negotiate, be creative, but not overly.
Yeah. You know, I remember negotiating when it was new, because you don't do that. When you were maybe interviewing for a position in service, you were just trying to sell yourself and then you got the job. We all got paid the same. So now trying to do compensation negotiation was a little bit different. You can negotiate your leave days. You know, you can negotiate your sign-on bonus, not just salary. So that's important. But I talk with some people and like, well, you know what? I'm going to tell them that because I'm a retiree, I get health insurance for free, and therefore they can just give me that extra money. And no, that's being over creative. It doesn't work that way, because at some point something may happen and now you take the health insurance because they have to give it to you. It's a benefit that's automatically applied, and now they just lost that money. So it's something that they cannot sign up for. And if somebody does get it, that's phenomenal for you. But in a major company with probably, let's say, more than 100 employees, that's most likely not going to happen. So be creative by saying, what are some things that I can negotiate for besides just salary, but not overly creative by trying to make them give things away that they can't give away.
Gotcha. Jack, you have some take on that?
Yeah, I would just add that when you find yourself in a public school district like I have for nearly 13 years, it's about like working for the federal government. Oh, new teachers, this is how much they make. They have a master's degree, there's a stipend for that. Oh, so you're going to be a director of this department? Well, that's pay grade E7, it actually is. And the midpoint is this, and that's the midpoint is the maximum we pay anybody who's new in the role. But you have to have experience. And I joke that the person who calculates salaries is significantly underpaid, so that they're not inclined to pay anybody any more than than they want to. So in some regard, if you go find yourself in another government role, there's not a lot of negotiation, but yet it's a civilian career, it's a civilian role, and it's well beyond the federal government and the military. So we tolerate some things that we were actually used to from active duty. This is what it pays, and here's where you're going to work.
That's right. You have two choices, right? Take it or leave it.
Pretty well. Yeah, that's thank you. This
pretty
was
much
your pay
it
for starting this role.
That's
Thank
right.
you. Thank
That's
you.
right.
Yes.
Mark, you mentioned a few experts to kind of follow and keep up with. So explain a couple of these and what they bring to the table that would help folks who find themselves in this position.
Right. So if you're not on LinkedIn, I highly recommend you get on LinkedIn. You know, it's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's a professional platform where you can be able to learn from people in the fields that you want to be in, network with them. And so some of those people that you can absolutely learn from, they put out content all the time. One being Michael Quinn. You know, he's been a noted speaker with his prior service. He was in the Army as an E9 and left there, and now he works for Ernst & Young. And so he puts out a lot of content, and a lot of things that I've been saying are things that he says. So you know, it's not new. This is really how it is. And so then you've got people. You know, I was at Luke Air Force Base, and really the person who helped me out a ton was Lori Norris. And you know, she helped me with resumes and interviews and compensation negotiations. And so, you know, I got to give her credit for everything that I'm saying now most likely came from her. And so I recommend you follow her. But then there's also civilian people out there who have no military experience, but are just so intelligent on this stuff. So you got Austin Belkak. He talks a lot about something that I did naturally on my interviews that I just thought would kind of give me a leg up. And he talks about it in terms of this value validation. So when they have their job descriptions out there and you're coming in for the interview, you do a little bit of research and you say, okay, what is their need that they have? Especially me as a process improvement person, you know, what are some issues or processes that I could work on? Put that together in like a portfolio. Really, it's just PowerPoint. I print up the slides, but put it in like some sort of portfolio and then show my projects that I've done that are very similar to that and give it to them. And now you're saying, hey, I recognize this is one of the problems that I see with just publicly available data that I have. Here's what I've done with something very similar to this that I feel would be beneficial to you. And no one comes to interviews like that. No one comes to interviews like that. And I always get an offer when I come to interviews like that.
Jack, you got some thoughts there?
Mark, I would hire you right now. You listen, your presentation skills, your ability to talk to people whom you may have just met or who you think you know well are very important. You know, just your comfort in a room full of folks, especially if they're the ones asking questions, is important. If you crash in front of a crowd, you got to practice this in some training to get ready to sit in front of 3 hiring officials would be very helpful, even beyond getting certifications and education and bringing some credentials to the role. If you can't present yourself well, it's a tough go, because how you present in an interview is how the panel thinks you're going to present to the employees that they want to give that whoever they hire the next day, a week later.
Yeah. I have always said that I feel like the most underdeveloped or unappreciated skill that anybody can develop is communication.
Yeah.
How to communicate, your expectations. If you expect to lead a team, how to communicate, your own thoughts and your goals and things. And exactly what you said is, if you can have great ideas, but if you can't get them off of paper and onto a team and inspire a team, you're kind of limiting yourself at that level. I've always felt like communication is so important, and written as well. You got to be able to communicate in an email, and people be able to read what in the world you're saying, and speak at the right level and with the right level of professionalism, right? So you got to learn those skills too. Hopefully you guys, I'm sure you learn a lot of that in the military. But
yes, yeah, I was just going to add that great writers are pretty rare. Among my even my staff, some of my salaried staff and supervisory staff, I can tell which ones are well able to express themselves on paper and which ones are less well able to, just sometimes by the very lack or the brevity of their communication. And thanks to the neighborhood app, I have seen and learned that most of the public doesn't write well at all. Right? It's unfortunate that we have so many, probably working adults and folks in society, and their writing skills are just a fraction of what they could have been or should have been when you see, places that people write publicly. And so, listen, to be trusted with the keys to any kingdom larger than a shack, writing is important. You can pay somebody to write your resume, but if you can't write a thank you note to the panel that impresses them, that's so. So I'm talking to English students now and students in classes where they develop their writing skills. These things are really important for those who aspire to lead groups larger than 2.
Yeah. That would be from a completely non-military background standpoint, other than family members who served dutifully, but I'm a weenie and I can't. That would be my recommendation to people who are looking, is make sure you're shoring up your communication skills. And there are places out there to do that, little modules you can go through, take an online course and work on that, because I think that'll serve you in any industry that you're in, is being able to just communicate well. And I get told all the time, I don't understand how you can stand up in front of a room and talk to people without any fear, or well, some of that is just I've built confidence over the years and I practiced it a whole lot. But you got to be able to sell yourself, and that's part of the skill. So, well, any last thoughts you guys have? Anything I didn't point out from Mark's great notes ahead of time that we want to make sure we leave people with before we go?
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity, first and foremost. You've probably been able to see just in a lot of the talking that I've done, I'm pretty passionate about this. I'm passionate about veterans, and I'm passionate about being able to successfully transition. I coach on my free time with veterans all the time, and you've heard me reference that a little bit. And I'm always open to doing that. Most of the time when you connect with people on LinkedIn, you should add a little note and say, hey, this is why I'm connecting with you. But a military person, veteran, I'll accept it with no comments, and if you want some help, I'm here for you. It is a difficult process, and so you should get those coaches and those trainers and be able to get the people who can help you. And so I volunteer anytime I can.
That's great, Mark. I think that's admirable. It's like you said, it's a harder process than I think people probably expect, and you don't want them floundering out there. They've served well, and they deserve to move smoothly into the next life. And so I appreciate your willingness to do that. You may get some takers out of that. So Jack, what about you? Final thought?
Yeah, Teresa, thanks for putting this together. The digital delivery is a whole lot bigger than it was 12 years ago when I retired. And so it's exciting to be able to share in a forum for folks to hear just a few of the nuggets that Mark and I have experienced over some years of now being in the civilian sector. And I would just urge anybody who would, be looking at retirement or separation to start early, prepare well, and be ready for an exciting second life. The military is a great place to be, but my civilian years have been even more exciting and maybe not as well traveled, though a little bit. But thanks for putting this together. Wayland is such a fantastic institution, and especially for military members seeking to get that degree done. We're indebted to you, Teresa, for helping lead us in this task. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Thank y'all. Well, we're really thrilled to have you both tonight. This has been amazing. Again, it's not a world I know real well, but I know I see people out there, and you guys do deserve a chance to move into that rich and fulfilling second career. You bring lots of skills to the table. that many of us do not have because we went the traditional route, and that's okay too. But so we appreciate you guys being willing to share your expertise. Just let me remind everybody, if you're watching this, that we do have career resources on campus. I may not know everything about the military transition, but I'm always happy to do a Zoom interview, mock interview with you. I'm always happy to look over resumes and stuff and try to help you do some translation in that. That's one of the services we provide to you guys until you die off this earth, because you're always one of our alumni family. We want to provide that for you. So please reach out to us if we can help you in any way, if we can be part of that job search process or that transition. We would love to help. So reach out to our office. Thank you guys both tonight for joining us, and we look forward to hearing more from you guys later, and have a great evening.